Shays' Rebellion, not just an uprising against an unorganized government, but a movement inspiring more people to call for a change in the inadequate government that was constructed on the weak Articles of Confederation. The rebellion, led by farmer Daniel Shays, impacted the government to hold the Constitutional Convention, which inspired much needed changes in the Articles of Confederation. Daniel Shays not only served as a major catalyst in the creation of the Bill of Rights, but he served as a wake-up call for the Founding Fathers to take action towards strengthening the government.
After the American Revolution, the new country of America experienced a debt crisis. The war took a major toll on their economy. These debts included both personal and state debts, which meant that the states could not fully pay their veterans. In a ploy to pay off their debts, many states raised taxes.
Massachusetts, in particular, controlled by elites, raised their taxes to help pay their war debt. But they did not think of ways to help the farmers or veterans already inhabiting Massachusetts. After gaining their independence, America also struggled with another major issue. They had little physical currency, such as gold, silver, and paper money, making it virtually impossible for farmers and others to pay off their debts, especially when missing their pay from the Revolution.
Daniel Shays fought in the Revolutionary War and joined at the beginning, rising to the rank of captain by the end of the war. In 1781, he returned to the civilian life, moving back home to work on his farm. Like many farmers across the country, Shays' farm had become overgrown with weeds and in need of restoration before it could overturn a profit. Shays and many of his neighbors fell into debt.
In addition to debt from the war, the country faced economic depression as ports and trading partners in Britain were closed to Americans. Eastern Massachusetts was hit especially hard, causing them to raise their taxes. Massachusetts got to a point where ordinary citizens would pay up to one-third of their income in taxes. Since they demanded gold and silver payments, many farmers had no choice but to declare default and see their property seized, some even being thrown in a debtor's prison.
Rhode Island wanted to help their citizens in debt with the printing of paper money. However, many politicians and merchants were suspicious of paper money and thought it would cause a price inflation. Massachusetts ignored the demands to print paper money, greatly frustrating many farmers, such as Daniel Shays.
To voice their frustrations, many farmers joined petition groups. Shays was an elected local representative. Many of their demands were ignored, and the colonists felt the government mirrored the corrupt British government. They felt their own government did not listen to the movement of no taxation without representation. Due to voting laws of the time, many farmers could not vote. Tired of seeing their farms taken, they decided to arm themselves.
In August and September of 1786, protesters made a nonviolent show of force with the goal of closing down the civil courts that prosecuted the old debt cases. The protesters succeeded in preventing the courts from sitting, and they even shut down the state Supreme Court when it attempted to meet at Springfield. The protesters called themselves regulators, which consisted of a loose alliance of Army veterans and sympathetic militia.
When the regulators arrived at the Springfield courthouse, another smaller state militia met them there. Shays, an active leader of the regulators, paraded his army around the guarded courthouse. The Supreme Court adjourned without hearing any cases, and the state militia withdrew and headed to the federal armory in fear of the regulators attacking for the weapons and gunpowder.
Tensions escalated through the fall of 1786. The Massachusetts government suspected that British influence was the only possible explanation of the sudden uprising. So, they implemented curfews and suspended habeas corpus. Warrants were issued for the arrest of identified members of the regulators. While the uprising started as a protest, it had snowballed into an open war with the state government, earning its name as the last battle of the American Revolution.
The federal government was slow to respond. The Articles of Confederation had limited the central government's powers so much that they could not even levy direct taxes. The central government was so weak, it was not in any position to contribute anything meaningful to the crisis. Yet, an order was issued to raise a regiment of federal troops to send to Massachusetts. However, Shays' rebellion ended by the time the troops could be raised, trained, and equipped. Upon hearing of the rebellion, Henry Lee of Virginia, a member of Congress, expressed alarm, saying,
"We are all in dire apprehension that a beginning of anarchy, with all its calamities, has approached, and we have no means to stop the dreadful work."
Henry Knox suggested that the rebellion shed light on how the government needed to be
braced, changed, or altered to secure our lives and property.
In January of 1787, blood was finally shed. Massachusetts Governor James Bowdoin called for the raising of a privately financed state militia led by Continental Army General Benjamin Lincoln, who personally raised the money required to equip the 3,000 men. Meanwhile, the regulators prepared to march to the Springfield Armory. A local militiaman commander by the name of William Shepard seized the armory with a force of 1,200 militiamen. Three groups of the regulators moved on the armory from north, south, and west.
Miscommunication to the Western group led by Daniel Shays caused his group to march on unsupported by his allies a day early. On January 25th, 1787, Shepard fired a warning shot to Daniel Shays' army of 1,400 men. When the warning shot failed to stop Shays, Shepard fired 2 cannons into their ranks. 4 men were killed and 20 more were injured. The attack fell apart, the men scattered, and they ended up regrouping near Amherst.
Lincoln's militia went west after hearing about the battle, hoping to pursue the defeated rebels. On February 4th, 1787, after an all-night walk through a blizzard, Lincoln and his men finally reached the rebel camp, causing it to scatter completely. Shays and other leaders managed to escape, fleeing to Vermont and New Hampshire. While sporadic resistance continued for months, the rebellion was officially over. Once the rebels had been defeated, Knox reported to Washington. Washington responded saying,
"On the prospect of the happy termination of this insurrection, I sincerely congratulate you, hoping that good may result from the cloud of evils which threatened not only the hemisphere of Massachusetts, but by spreading its baneful influence, the tranquility of the Union."
Immediately after the rebellion, many arrests were made, and 2 men, Charles Rosé and John Bly, were hanged. Shays never returned to Massachusetts, deciding instead to settle in upstate New York. Like other participants in the rebellion, he was pardoned. The state government that had put down the uprising was soon voted out of office, and the new governor and legislators set about addressing the grievances of the regulators. Tax burdens were eased, pardons were granted, and the means of alternative payment were allowed, such as paper money. It helped bring the state back on the road to economic recovery.
Since America was still in its infancy, Shays' rebellion caused skepticism, even by Americans, of whether a republic government could effectively control a large nation. Even at the time of Shays' rebellion, a new Continental Congress had been called out, but had not yet convened to draft a new constitution. In the summer of 1787, the Congress finally convened. Shays' rebellion gave weight to a lot of Federalist Party, a political party that argued for a strong federal government. The weak response to the rebellion on both a state and federal level caused for a major agreement on the creation of a strong federal arm that would bind together the republic.
The Federalists won the argument, and the new Constitution boasted a much stronger central government. While many were reluctant to vote in favor of the new Constitution, they were won over by the Bill of Rights, that guaranteed freedom against the new and stronger government. Yet, this Constitution quickly spread to the whole of the United States.
Yet, waves of anti-tax revolutions still occurred. Washington would later have to use military to put down the Whiskey Rebellion in Pennsylvania.
The aftermath of Shays' rebellion included a widespread of punishment for participants, with many being captured by a privately funded Massachusetts militia. Shays and many other men would eventually be pardoned by Massachusetts' newly elected government of 1788, John Hancock.
The rebellion sparked the Massachusetts legislature to enact significant reforms. These reforms included cutting taxes and putting a temporary stoppage to collections of debt. In doing so, this directly adhered to the struggles of the farmers. The state of Massachusetts did not always help the rebels, however. Massachusetts passed the Disqualification Act. This act banned members of the rebellion from voting, serving on jury, or holding public office.
The rebellion called into question the power of the state and federal government, and how effective they truly were. The rebellion accelerated calls to reform the Articles of Confederation, and it played a major role in getting George Washington to return to public life. The rebellion was a catalyst for the creation of a strong federal government, a government that could better address the economic and political needs of the growing nation of the United States of America.